Yep. All
Yep.
there.
So you know what you need to do. Just the first Hahe reserves.
Yep.
Okay, right. Welcome back, and we are on item 3.2, which is the Mercury Bay Reserves Management Plan deliberations. Hello, Emma. Welcome.
Good morning. Hello.
And sorry, just to add, we have Faith online as well.
Thank you.
Hi, Faith.
Hi.
Derek.
Sorry, I'm fluey, so I won't speak unless I absolutely have to.
Okay. All right. Well,
She's online.
thanks for being online.
And we have Derek.
I'm keeping my bugs away from everybody.
Okay. Good idea. And sorry, Derek, I see that you're there too as well. Thank you.
Hi, Derek.
Kia ora.
Right. Emma.
Wonderful. Well, I'm sure you've all read this in great detail.
Absolutely.
It is. I appreciate and understand that it's quite a lot of information presenting to you today. That has mostly been impacted just by the level of engagement and interest from the community on this reserve management plan, and also just the sheer quantum of reserves that are in the Mercury Bay area. So we've got a wee bit of a strategy for how maybe make this a little bit easier to scroll through. So with each of the areas, you'll note that the recommendations or the staff advice pertaining to changes for the draft final reserve management plan are in boxes throughout the document, just to make them stand out a bit. And those recommendations are also on the screen that we've got up here. And that's just so we can keep track of decisions and any changes to those recommendations or additions. So I guess the only way to begin is just by cracking in. The order of the document is based on the order of the reserve management plan. So as we scroll through the changes, we'll be able to follow logically through the reserve management plan that's attached in attachment B. The exception to that is obviously some general submissions that were received to not one particular reserve, and also we've got the more stretch reserve and also Hahe Beach Recreation Reserve. There's some decisions that we're asking the community board to make, which will have effects throughout the rest of the document. Just for consistency, so that's why we've got those up front, and once we've made a call on that, we'll be able to flow through the rest.
Okay.
Right, so I'm just going to remember that I've got that mouse and this mouse. Cool. So to start off with the general submissions, we've grouped those into those 5 subgroups there. Relating to the document and its structure, relating to issues covered by the General Policies Reserve Management Plan, which you'll remember was adopted by Council before this review began for the rest of the Reserve Management Plans. The archaeological and heritage sites across the area, which is predominantly from Heritage New Zealand and then some comments on reserve management groups through the area, and finally we had several submissions on Dark Sky and Beetle Bay, which of course is about the entire area and not one specific reserve. So moving swiftly on, general comments on the document. I'm not going to go into any great detail in reading out the whole thing because we'll be here all day.
No, not all.
But the submissions were mainly around making it easier to read and easier to navigate, especially given where we've turned 3 reserve management plans and documents into one.
Yes.
So most of those submissions were really quite helpful and will make it a better document on the whole. So recommending those 4 points up on the screen.
Yep, that makes sense.
So recreating the maps, referring to the index more explicitly in the front, making LPR into local purpose reserve, because of course not everyone knows what LPR means, and just updating Recreation New Zealand with Recreation Aotearoa, which is their preferred and proper name.
Yep, they all. Anyone got any comments?
then.
Yep.
Cool.
Good idea.
I'm just going to say A for accept, so I don't have to write the whole thing. Cool. So, oops, the next is, and there's a bit of a delay. I'm just going to let it catch up. No. So the next one is the background section. Again,
Yes.
this was some typos that were spotted, which is always really helpful to make it a better document on the whole. And then just some changes to the content of the background just to make it more accurate. We also received a statement directly from Ngāti Hei, which is really helpful just to set the scene for the rohi and how they wish to be perceived, which we've just put in verbatim because there's no point in changing that at all. So any feedback on this section?
No, I think it's fantastic that, that we have that.
Yeah, we're really happy to receive that. So the next section is general matters contemplated by the General Policies Reserve Management Plan. So we weren't surprised to receive a lot of submissions that were covered by the General Policies document. That's the exact reason why we have a General Policies document, because most of these issues can be dealt with consistently throughout the district. They don't have to be dealt with on an individual reserve basis. And we also understand that people are very busy and they're not going to necessarily have time to read cover to cover the General Policies Reserve Management Plan as well as the individual reserve management plans. So the feeling was that largely these submissions were in response to what submitters felt was a gap in the individual reserve management plan, but when read in the context of the General Policies Reserve Management Plan, we are covered by the issues that are raised in those submissions. What that does tell us, though, is that there are some reserves where the community feel that this is a specific issue, and while it's dealt with in the General Policies document, we think it's prudent to just alert that to the staff on the ground that those are issues that are being raised, and so they can keep those in mind when they're just going about the operational day-to-day work.
Good.
So that's the recommendations there. Any further comments on
No,
that?
I think they seem very clear,
Great.
very common sense.
Wonderful. So this next section, as I mentioned, it's largely from the Heritage New Zealand Pohere Taonga. So they provided some really great feedback on how they would prefer heritage and archaeological sites to be referenced in the Reserve Management Plan. We've largely accepted their submission with no change and abide by doing the recommended changes that you see on page 59 of the agenda. So I don't believe there's anything terribly controversial in that. We're just doing some recategorisation. As you may recall, the categories in the Reserve Management Plan are tools to help us manage the reserves. So by recategorising those reserves that have some really special archaeological ones to cultural as opposed to them being neighbourhood reserves or anything else, just gives a little bit more of a flag.
You're taking questions on some of this. Yeah, I see you're up to the bit about cultural and heritage.
Yeah.
And so I was over with Charlie Hudson, I was mentioned on Friday, and his issue, and I've only sort of found out more about this, where the original consent had all of that land around the edge of that estuary as recreational reserve.
So where are you talking about? At
Longreach.
Longreach,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's the one that's mentioned here.
Okay.
And now, as part of, as I understand this, as part of giving the consent to Longreach, it was a requirement that we and Heritage put part of this into Heritage Reserve, or give it heritage status. Now, Colin's point is that all of the land, so it's the one reserve, you can go and see a peg, so left of it, when you look to the estuary, is recreational reserve, right of it's heritage.
Yes.
And that land was all intensively farmed. Every year it was ploughed, every year it was planted. So it had like full, what I'd say is rural farming use. There's a part of the land that you can see when you stand there, which is where there would have been probably a marae or something, where they did some, made edges and other things for farming, and they recognise that, and where the middens are. So his issue is this road that, and I can't remember all this detail exactly, that goes down to where there's a little parking space.
Hurangi Landing Road.
What, Red?
Hurangi Landing.
Hurangi Landing, no. So I thought there was some discussion that we'd shut that down because it's it isn't a very good place, because there's access now into Longreach road that ends up into this reserve. And what he's saying is the minute this goes to heritage, that you will not be able to put a formed track across to meet up to where Mrs. Piper brings her kayak in and then hops in a car in that little car park area and drives out of the road. It's a gravel road. And you won't be able to put a bar, if we decide at some stage it'd be a good place to put a barbecue because people go down there, you won't be able to do that with that status. So he's just raised a concern with me, and I'm raising that concern here because he'll want someone to give him that answer. So I'm clear that a condition of the consent was it'd be between TCDC and Heritage to do that. And because no one's notified about it. And it's not to laugh at the event where he's on the consent tracker, it's a pretty boring life, and has found that out, and he's raised that with me.
It says in here to recategorise Longreach as cultural heritage.
Yeah, he doesn't want that to happen because the minute you do it, you will not be able to get access out of the car park. He suggested into the car park you have a walkway formed to where that little landing is where Mrs. Piper comes over.
There's a car park formed on that road now, though.
Yeah, I realise that,
on
but
that
you can't
Hurangi
get
Landing Road.
to the issue. You can't. So they've planted all the front of it. So his argument is people now, when they build the houses, and they've been built very rapidly, will simply drag their kayaks or their small dinghies across the reserve through the planting, and it's happening now because when you go there, people are just walking straight through the planting. And he's suggesting if there was a formed track that people could come out through that in that reserve space, where it joins up to where the road is now, then.
Sorry, Tony, can I just interrupt for a second there? So at the moment, TCDC staff are working with Heritage New Zealand to develop a management plan for that area. And that's like all of these things are things that are being considered. The category of cultural heritage is not the same as the reserve classification. So I'm fairly sure maybe that one is historic, but the one further around going towards the Hurangi boat ramp is just a recreation reserve.
That is absolutely correct.
Yeah, so
Colin's point is,
yeah,
it's a line in the ground that says left of that peg, it's just recreational reserve, and right of it, and that's going back to this road we're talking about, in that area, you won't be able to do anything in there if that gets it. All I'd ask is it possible that someone can speak to Colin so you can get his understanding of it? Because I think what he had to say made pretty good sense, because it's an opportunity to shut that road down and have them come out of that little car park through a formed road and out through Longreach Estate. And if you've got a kayak or a dinghy, you go there and you don't keep walking through the planting and knock over all the work that's been done in that space. And it's happened now because I've been there personally to look at it at some detail.
Yeah, no, we were up there about a fortnight ago and we met with Heritage New Zealand. So the heritage or the conservation management plan will cover all of that area. So even though the reserve classifications are different, the category for managing them is the same, and there will be reserve a management plan, like a conservation heritage management plan, that they're working with us that will cover all of that area.
Okay.
So we will have some consistent management approaches, is what I'm saying,
okay.
And we are, and that's exactly the sort of thing we're talking about. You know, will we be able to put in a walkway? Will we be able to plant?
Okay. Well, can I ask that someone speak with Colin?
Yeah.
So you get his input.
Yeah.
And to understand, because what I know is if it's left to heritage and some of our people, the practicalities of it might not necessarily be taken into account.
Yeah.
And from a heritage point of view, that piece of land is actually just disused farmland because it's had more ploughs through it than I've actually seen. So there's nothing in there. What they did find was well away from that area that's got the heritage reserve status over it, or they want to put it over it. So
yeah.
I just asked if someone could actually speak to Colin and meet with him perhaps, because I said my stuff and Brian Taylor sent me my answers. And I have been to look at it, and what Colin's saying makes a fair bit of sense to me.
And I think what he's saying isn't inconsistent with the recommendations that we have, and the work, I guess the how is an operational kind of discussion.
Yeah, I think he's saying that if other people want to put a net, like a basketball hoop there or a barbecue there, if we're not careful, you'll never be able to do anything with it. And what it's doing is the planting, which is quite well established, but a lot of it's knocked over. And so it's just but yeah, I just asked, because I'll be ringing Colin tonight and I'll be telling him that someone will contact him to actually discuss it with him. Is that fair?
Yes, yep, no, we can absolutely do that, yeah.
Done.
And what we've got in the reserve management plan is at the beginning of the cultural section, which is, sorry, just find the page reference. So it's page 38 of the actual reserve management plan. I'm not sure what page that is in the agenda. Oh, that's, sorry, I'm putting it wrong. Okay. So the cover is page 33 of the draft management plan document, and it actually speaks directly to maintenance and development of reserves that we consider to be cultural heritage, and it states that dependent upon the location and cultural significance, there may be limited number of quality assets provided and maintained to a high standard. So it's definitely doesn't indicate that there's no development whatsoever, but that anything put on them just really well considered, which I think speaks to the concerns that Colin have. Yeah,
I just think it's just to satisfy yourself that this is well used land. So from a heritage perspective, unless it was a landing place or something and it's been well farmed since then, maybe. And it's interesting because that's where the well was that supplied that farm and their households with their water. So it's a bit of an interesting piece of land in there when you look at it, and it's interesting to know about Cedric Rise because he's got some issues there that prove it's going the other way.
Okay, so no, carry on.
Just with respect to the Paringi landing and access, the council's development engineer and myself met with Mrs. Piper and some other landowners who are on those landlocked sections across the other side, and they were really clear and basically wanting to know how that reserve affected them, but also the continuation of Paringi landing as their basic highway to get across the river and park and come through. So that she, Mrs. Piper, has had discussions with us about that as well. So.
Okay. But so you know exactly what she said. So you come from there, there'd be a road come from there and join up to the road into the car park.
Yeah, she's quite happy with it now that it has a little car park put into Paringi landing. So she just wanted reassurance that that reserve wasn't stopping her access from the other side of the river.
That's right.
Yeah.
Good. So Emma will pick up, or someone from the team will pick up with Colin and just to make sure that he's heard as well.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic.
I'm trying to note that we've got.
I've got his comment.
Question. Oh, wonderful. I'll touch base with you at lunch.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Great. And I've just noted that there's a question regarding long reach recategorisation.
Yep.
But we're happy with the remaining comments on those.
Yes.
Yeah. Right, so the next section is the reserve management groups. So several submitters had some statements just around how council interacts with reserve management groups, and several were requesting that council re-establish the previous these situation where there were multiple reserve management groups around the area. This could have been dealt with in the general policies section of this, but I wanted to elevate it just because there were quite a few submissions on this topic. And luckily for us, it is covered in the general policies document that council will work with community groups on reserves, and so there's nothing stopping those things from happening. And while this is, it does seem to be, I guess, an operational matter, we've just got that recommendation of the Mercury Bay Community Board is noting that community appetite for the re-establishment of reserve groups in the area, because a lot of the statements were sort of directed at a governance level as opposed to a staff sort of operational level.
Yeah.
So we're happy for that to be noted. Great. Okay, next one is the dark sky in Opito Bay. So we received submissions on support of a dark night policy. We don't have obviously anything in the reserve management plan on that. I believe that has been worked towards in a different body of work. The reserve management plan doesn't contradict anything to that effect. I understand that if it was to occur, it may even fall under a district planning layer. So the reserve management plan is not interested in duplicating anything or indeed getting ahead of any district plan measures. So there's obviously still very, very strong support for that to happen. It sounds quite an exciting thing to do. So yeah, cool. Really cool. Right, so that's the general stuff out of the way. The next two reserves, as I mentioned, deal with some issues that are across the that have implications across the rest of the reserves in the RMP. The first one is to do with the Moore Crescent Reserve. There were quite a lot of submissions received on commercial activities on the reserve.
Is it freedom camping issues in that area at the moment as well?
Going on at the moment.
So I don't know if we don't have a position necessarily on that at the moment, but I don't know if this is a place you can say there's no freedom camping there.
And so we will have other discussion related to the Moore Street if we could maybe focus on the commercial concessions just for now, and then we've got the balance of the submissions. Just because Jeremy's having to exclude himself from this particular discussion, so I don't want to have him miss out on anything. So we received across the reserve management plan many submissions on the commercial concessions, both for and against either status quo, reduction of concessions, increase of concessions, queries about the limits imposed by those maximum numbers that we have on some of the more sensitive reserves. The balance of submissions, it's a staff advice that we actually remove those limits that are currently throughout the reserve management plan and rely on the general policies reserve management plan to inform the community decisions on granting concessions. And that just allows for...
that seems like a curly one.
It does, yes. The impression that we got from the submissions is that those minimums, or those maximums, seemed to be more as a target. And a reflection that there will always be commercial concessions on the reserve without allowing for that level of discretion that the other reserves maybe have.
Yeah, go, because I think you're going to say the same thing as me.
Can I? Well, if I can agree to that on the condition concessions come to the community board, because concessions used to come to the community board in conjunction with the reserve management plans, and we had no problem. Then in the wisdom staff said, no, we're going to issue concessions, and then the community board got a heck of a kickback because a lot of staff didn't understand the idiosyncrasies of different communities. Where do we stand now? Are concessions approved by they're now approved by the community board again, aren't they?
Are you talking about commercial concessions or events? Commercial
Both,
concessions.
both.
So commercial concessions always come to the board for recommendation to
They didn't for a
council.
while and we got
Did they
struck.
not? Okay, and then events.
So they are all coming now.
Yes,
And that's in the.
So then I can
process
accept that.
Document.
but events are more staff focused, unless
I think when you have a limit, you have sort of greater scrutiny as well.
Yeah.
Sorry, can I just interrupt
Yes.
a bit here? So,
Yes, please do.
for all the other district reserve, sorry, I'm losing my voice a bit there. Reserve management plans, we have done the same as what we're suggesting here. So we're not putting a number. So what we are actually doing is when we get the concession applications come in, which the community board gets to have a look at and have a say on, we can look at it from an effects basis. So what are the effects of these activities on the reserve and the other reserve users, rather than we're allowed 3 concessions on this reserve and they've all got to be land-based as opposed to water-based. However, in actual fact, it's not really appropriate to have 3 water-based commercial activities on this reserve. So what I'm trying to say is that we're looking, without putting a number, each time we get these applications in, we can actually go back and have a look at the general policies in the reserve management plan, look at all the things that this particular commercial activity might have effects on or might not, as the case may be, and then make a judgment call on that rather than the number of activities on that reserve. And the other thing is that these plans don't often, it's been 2007 was the last time this plan was actually reviewed. So if you put a number in there, you're locked into that for, a number of years. And as we well know, things change very rapidly in this world today. So where we've said that, only 2 commercial activities can occur on this reserve, it may well be that there's probably enough room, enough space for more than that, but we've put a number in which will actually limit that. So I guess that's where we're coming from, and this is the approach we've taken with the other reserve management plans.
The other areas don't have the issues, though, do they, that Mercury Bay seems to have in terms of, I just think what puts the onus back on the board to be incredibly thorough in their review of concessions.
Well, the staff will make the recommendations to the board essentially they will do the background work and they will provide that information to the board to make that decision. So it will require the board to make that recommendation to council, but the staff will be doing all the background work, and I think that's appropriate as well, because they're the people on the ground who experience what the issues are when there's too many cars parking up to use the kayak hire at a reserve that's already got limited car parking, etc. That's just an example, but that's the information that will be thoroughly looked at and considered before the report goes to the community board.
I'm happy because we got into strife. I remember one where we had, I think it was a waterborne activity and someone wanted an ice cream cart.
Yeah.
And the ice cream cart had virtually no effect,
Yes.
but it was still classed as a concession.
Yeah.
So we ran into strife with the numbers.
No, I see the benefits. Certainly,
I'm happy.
we had that hamburger place that wanted to operate in the evening, but we'd already given up.
Exactly.
So I do definitely see the benefits. I just, I know our communities will feel.
Common sense, really.
Yeah.
Purangi is a classic example where I think the old plan says, 3, something like that, and then we've allowed more because they all work at different times, and some just use it as an overflow. But we're outside the reserve management plan, so I guess the rationale behind this is that it allows you to go, well, actually, they all work at different times, and there's not that limit set on you, so potentially makes it a little easier.
Okay, so that's.
You're right, it is a big pool, and we've listed the ones that it would affect there. There's also, I guess, something else to consider that the union submitters, which is summarised in this report, had comments about Hawthorne Bay in general, and that there should be no commercial activity on any reserve ever, full stop. End of story. The language that they were using in these submissions started to get into more, there shouldn't be a commercial zone and we don't want shops. And so I believe that maybe in the course of it being discussed in the community, there was maybe a bit of a misunderstanding of what a commercial concession is. It's not a a mall, it's the shopping cart or the kayaks. But there was a very clear message regardless that the community were really keen to see limits on activities of commercial natures on reserves.
So in that case, if that was, if the board thinks that that's probably a good way to go, then we would put in the reserve management plan, in the more crescent reserve, commercial operators licenses or whatever we call them these days are not permitted on this reserve. So it's where we don't want them to happen. We know that it's not a good idea. We'll put that in the reserve management plans. Otherwise, we'll remain silent, and every application then is assessed on its own merit.
Yes. So I guess interested in the community.
I'd certainly support that for Opito, because we've certainly heard that from in the
Consistently.
yeah, they want to have that beachy.
Yeah. So I believe, and I'm looking here now, there's currently one concession on the
More crescent.
is it the coffee cart?
No, there was a submission saying that there was a coffee cart.
Yeah, but
And we haven't issued a concession for a coffee cart.
a road.
If there is one, we don't know about it.
Probably.
I don't know about it.
So it would be fair to suggest that so for that point 2 up on the screen there, we're seeking guidance from the community board, that you would support a restriction of no commercial activity on Moore Street, on Moore Place.
Yeah. Is everybody comfortable with that? Just looking around the table? Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
That's in addition to the what's in the draft reserve management plan. We didn't make that change, so we wanted to get your thoughts on that. So that will be changed for council adopting. My spelling is coming.
Okay.
Okay. And for the balance of reserves, the community board is comfortable with limits being removed, or
I am hesitantly confident that that's the right decision. Telly? Yeah. Laurie, you seem comfortable. Tony?
Yeah, I'm happy.
Bill?
Is there anything to say that there should be no fixed activities? You're talking about people not wanting.
yeah, so it is a fixed-based the approach taken in the general policies documents. It will be all based on the specific situation of each reserve. If it was inappropriate, the community board could absolutely make the call that given the effects of the activity, this particular concession would not be appropriate to grant.
But then it's only for a limited period. So what happens if they vacate
Oh, you're thinking more of leasing?
Pardon?
Are you thinking of a building?
A building, yes.
Oh, okay, so that would fall under a lease of
As opposed to a concession.
as opposed to a concession.
Okay,
yeah.
right.
So that's a
Okay,
different
fine.
official to get
Yeah,
there.
just little subtleties might trip us.
Oh, yeah, no, and believe me, it's important to ask.
Okay, thank you.
Clarify, yeah.
Good.
Right.
So yes, I'm.
Okay. The next one is the We've got the other submissions to the more present reserve. Tony, you were mentioning freedom camping. That would actually would be considered out of scope of the reserve management plan. Council deals entirely with freedom camping through the bylaw. So that's why there may not be any reflection of that in this section of the document, but people did provide section just information, further information about what the reserve is like, and we've suggested that we make changes for all of those suggestions because it adds to the background and information on the reserve. So, did you want to discuss the freedom camping issue in any greater detail?
No, I take on board that the freedom camping bylaw will deal with that, and we should stick to the reserve management plan for reserves issues and dogs and freedom campers and other things looked after in other parts of our organisation.
Because I am aware that this is page 2 of 10.
Yeah. It'll get easier. I did put the grunty one. I put the grunty ones up there.
No, just if we get sidetracked on to all sorts of other stuff.
And again, the submissions that are out of scope, suggesting that they get passed on to the relevant staff members.
Yep.
So Heather was going to do a lovely big email to me at the end of this.
Heather's suddenly looking really worried.
Yeah.
Whoever's got your name on it.
So the next one is Hahei Beach Recreation Reserve. Again, this one has had many submissions on the commercial activities, both for and against the limits, whether it be status quo or the changes. But the overarching theme from the submissions is that they wanted the concessions to be really carefully thought through on the reserve. So this is obviously one that is high interest and sensitivity in the community, as I'm sure you're aware.
Can I just add something to this then? So we've been having discussions when we start talking about fees and charges. So it's fees and charges for people that are going to use reserves and public assets, like wharves and other things. And increasing some of these charges, potentially, and giving them longer tenure so that we give them a property right to justify the increase in fee so they can trade. So this, I note, is still at 3 years, and I'm wondering if when we have the fees and charges discussion and say we have to let concession for $5,000 a year for 10 years, when we have 3 years there, we'd have to come back and address the reserve management plan unless we address that now, because the two things I see go hand in hand.
Right.
The concessions we give out are primarily on reserve land, and we haven't had the concession discussion yet, or the fees and charges discussion.
Yeah, so you're right in that the fees and charges discussion is being driven through the long-term plan, so the reserve management plan is...
Well, it's not, we missed it.
So it's not now.
Fees and charges missed the long-term plan because that work didn't get done, that's the problem.
I'm speaking for the concessions. Yeah.
So I just think if we leave 3 years in here,
It needs to go
and
out.
we do have that discussion, and let's say that we we land on a place that says we will give up to 10 years, and that the annual fees will be based on whatever. And the logic is that if you have the concession, you have a right that's tradable. We can't do that.
But yeah, so I
Unless we
believe
come back and do this job again.
I believe the 3 years comes from the general policies document. And
That's what on page 63.
you're able to confirm or deny that?
I'm not sure. Where does the 3 years? Where have you seen the 3 years, Tony?
On page 63.
On 63.
Says, under the general policies,
Correct.
commercial operators are not permanent and are only for 3 years at a time.
That's correct, but
It's non-exclusive use, and we have been talking about
Exclusive.
considering under fees and charges that they get an exclusive right. And for, I don't know what the period is, but I'm just suggesting as a number, 10 years. So we can get a better return, and for the person with the concession, they've actually got something when they build their business up, and someone says, well, I wouldn't mind that pie cart or that ice cream stall. They've got something they can sell.
So it needs to be that the time, the length of time of each concession to be determined on individual merit.
Yeah, but would you put a maximum of, say, up to 5
Well, I
years?
don't think we need to do that. I think you're limiting yourself. As soon as you put, because we might go and say, we get a good deal, we might say, you've got a 10-year concession, you're paying this rent, or for five-year concession, you're paying this rent. That's the whole idea.
Would that require the general policies document to be changed, Faith?
And that's,
I think that's actually, there is a change to be made. It'll be made to the general policies document, because it'll be a district-wide thing. It won't be specific to any.
so how do we accommodate?
Yeah.
So
And
how do we
that-
accommodate that in this?
Oh, we won't, because this is the individual reserve management plan. What it would require would be a general policies document to make that change, which is perfectly, that's entirely achievable. We can do that. These are living documents. They can change. So if there was a change to be made and the policy needed changing, it would be done in the general policies document.
Does that have to go to consultation?
I imagine, yes.
That's what I'm trying to avoid.
Yeah,
So had we done the other work on time,
it would be right for this.
we would be right to put it into here. So at the moment, I'd be looking at this and saying, if we have to go back and consult and change this, I'd be tempted to make it 10 years now and make it up to 10 years at our discretion, so that we've actually got it covered when we go and look at the general policy statement and ultimately get to the fees and charges, which the way it goes won't happen in my lifetime.
I don't think we can do that though, because this has already gone out for public consultation, these individual reserve management plans, and it's not something that is been looked at. So it would kind of, it's almost like it would need its own change, because it's fairly significant. And I don't think just change it in Mercury Bay. We have to change it across the district.
I
agree. We agree with that.
We totally agree.
Yeah,
That's what we're trying to get to.
Yeah.
So we sat in a meeting with a long dissertation about how we get revenue to offset rates on getting a better structure around what we charge people, and particularly visitors and people that use council assets. And we've been trying to get this work done for 10 years.
Yeah.
It's never got done.
Yeah.
And yet we're dealing with something now, which is a document we only review every 10 years, the reserve management plans as I understand it. And so we've missed the boat because we sort of had the cart before the horse. And so for me, I can say it's disappointing. This is not a crack at your team at all, is that we've seen this coming for 10 years. And here we are, because we didn't do another piece of work, we're hamstrung. So I guess I've just got to bend over and say 3 years and acknowledge defeat.
Well, we just go through the consultation process and then we change that
Again.
policy. I know that. I get the frustration.
You know, we're trying to get. So the ratepayer pays for the consultation. Maybe we should have been banging tables harder.
But would we have to go to consultation, and we're going to look at Alan here, and he's deep in thought. Would we necessarily have to go to consultation, because concessions are relatively small numbers, affecting a relatively small number of people?
But you're changing a general policy document, potentially.
It'd be potentially a lot more if it was 10 years.
We change other policy documents too.
Well, some of them would be, again, it comes down to the operator, the concession holder, and what the scale of their operation, and some of them are quite significant. You might get away with some of the smaller scale ones, but I think if it's...
So we didn't go with the ferry.
We'd struggle. Sorry?
We didn't go with the ferry,
No,
which is probably
that's
biggest.
that's not a concession under this policy though, that's a wharf usage fee. It's not a reserve concession.
No,
So the wharf users, that's not affected by this.
Yeah.
It's only the concession holders on reserve land. So it's the likes of the kayaks and
Yeah.
hayden.
I'm in your camp, I'd like to set up to 10 years, I'm just wondering how we can do it, and then there's discretion. Because I can see us going relitigating all this in about another 3 years' time, and you poor people having to go through it with all of them again. I don't want that.
So if it changes in that general policies document, that feeds
This would affect all of the reserve management plans in the district, which sounds like would be appropriate. I've checked, and the general policies is explicit concessions of from 13 days to 3 years. So that's their window of time. So if council wanted to increase that upper limit, yeah, it would be a change to the general policies document. If it was only that one change, the significance and engagement policy currently would allow council to sort of maybe do a more targeted consultation, but that analysis would have to be done once the decision had been made to seek.
Maybe Rex, we'll be going out to consult on a number of things over the next 12 months. So something like, for me, this is pretty narrow, like it's almost one sentence and probably less than 30 words. Could that be tacked on to something else we do? Because there is at the moment only going to be maybe 50 people that have got consents currently. There'll be a lot of other people that might be thinking about it, but I think 3 years is not worth me investing in a pie card. Can we tack that onto something else we do?
That would definitely be a question for maybe Derek and Faith to answer that. I'm tapping out of that one.
Well, I'm talking about a policy thing, so not for Derek, because he's got to control. We might be going out to consult on fees and charges, we might be going to consult on freedom camping or dogs, but we go out and consult on two of this. Not even doing the district planning thing, it's not one issue, we'll end up with 10 variations that we're going to go out with.
Yeah, I mean, consultations can be run concurrently, and the council does that.
I guess we can get that on, somehow recorded, that this matter be considered for inclusion. So we're going to have the discussion first, but in the next lot of the most appropriate time, we need to go out for public consultation. That way we can probably head some of that off, and if it gets approval of that, then it'll be a case of just going and changing this number.
Yeah, and I do wonder, just as an aside, I do wonder if that that term, the days up to 3 years, is not something that's maybe prescribed in the Reserves Act. So I will check that, because it may be that we've actually got a legislative requirement for how long we can issue them. Okay. So that's something I will check as well. Yeah.
Thanks, Faith.
Yeah, the general policies document does say that these documents can have rights of renewal attached, which may be able to go some way in the interim. If the community board did want to attach a right of renewal, giving that concession holder some security.
So that is in the policy?
That is in the policy, that a right of renewal.
That's kind of solid,
We give it 3+2 rights of renewal, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay, well.
Wonderful.
Just look at that more depth.
Just means the fees and charges and needs to be done with urgency.
Needs to be really thorough, like a proper. Okay, right. So did we actually answer the question on?
So this is, I guess, a reiteration of what you'd previously resolved to do, which was to remove those limits.
Yep.
The reason I wanted to really explicitly raise it to you was that there were a considerable number of submissions on the specific reserve on that issue. So for the balance on this reserve, there were lots of submissions on various issues. Page 64, 65 of the agenda. Regarding mostly the beach access. We're suggesting that we remove policy B in relating to the beach access, which, if you let me find it. It did say allow the boat launching access to be used only by emergency services, small craft, single axle trailers and licensed water-based commercial operators. Rather than making that explicit policy on the reserve, we're suggesting that instead we put as an issue on the reserve management plan that the beach access is in poor condition and is only suitable for small light craft. And that gives the community board the ability to actually do something about the issue rather than just sort of being a underline full stop, can only be used for light craft forever kind of situation.
It's an interesting thing that, because I went and looked at a reserve that we don't like people driving over dunes and that. And the two instances I really looked at where they are, and quite often, that's where the dune's at its highest because it's all been compacted and new sand turns up and gets compacted, so it's actually working. It's actually helping us.
Oh dear.
Contrary to what other people might say.
Yes.
So any feedback on the balance of that reserve versus issues there?
Yeah.
I think parking is always going to be, for those concession holders, I'm just not sure how to solve it. I mean, can we tag in that,
It's correct.
parking has to be encouraged
Every pictures.
back at the entrance?
I didn't know.
Car
Well, I
park?
mean,
It's not about that reserve though, is it?
yeah, it's not about that
About-
reserve, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well, yes.
So what we can say, what we've added in this reserve management plan is that the current infrastructure on the reserve is not sufficient to meet the future demand. So we noted it's an issue and that enables council and community board to prioritise addressing the issue.
Okay.
And that might be elevating or making it more attractive to park elsewhere, which you, I guess, are already doing, and
Or limiting parking.
or limited parking, yeah, without prescribing a specific
Okay.
resolution.
All right. Okay.
Great, so we are next going to talk about Margaret Place, just so we can let Mary back in the room.
Can you just give us a page number?
Yes. That's all I can.
I probably should have had that emailed.
Sorry,
This document would have been useful, actually. We weren't sent this one, were we?
no, so this is just copy and paste from the main
Yeah,
document.
okay.
Yeah.
But it kind of summarises a lot
Yes,
of things I've
yeah.
been scrolling through.
So that's 78?
78.
Yeah.
Well done.
No worries.
So again, we have submissions related to the concessions, but we've dealt with that issue and removed those restrictions. The submissions, there was a range of issues raised. That I guess very similar to other reserves that are highly used, things around parking, shade, conflicting uses, people wanting to access the boat ramp versus use the area for picnicking. And so the changes that we've suggested, one of them is in response to a submission on a point where the draft without consultation suggested that we promote a access to the reserve, and we replaced that word just with encourage, because the submitter was quite right in saying that promote had a different connotation. And the reason we still want to include that is it is the most appropriate access of the reserve for vehicles, and it's the safest place for them to access the reserve. Hence the term encourage rather than promote.
Let's start page 79.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry.
Top of 79.
top of 79, yeah. Oh, yes, yeah.
Bill's got one, we might have to just read over his shoulder.
Okay, I think they all Everyone's happy with the ones at the top of page 79?
79, the only one I mentioned here is the Bowie Park Reserve, because we know we've had quite a lot of interest for a marae.
Sorry, are we still on Mercury?
Just the recommendations on the top of page 79.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry,
No,
because,
yeah.
No, I'm happy with those, yeah.
Yeah, they all seem.
We need to let Jeremy.
Yes,
come
yeah,
back
so
in.
Jeremy's now able to re-enter the space. I'll just jump down to my place and just.
Be late for him, he's sailing tomorrow.
Was he?
G'day guys, I'm
Hey.
here.
Right, so we're going to scroll back up to where we were, just underneath Hahe Recreation Reserve, which is
Page 64, 63 and 64.
Yeah.
Yep, so we should be on to page 60.
I think 63.
63?
66 now, shouldn't it?
Oh, okay.
Oh, we've done that.
yes, the line.
Oh, right, sorry, 66.
So hopefully a lot of these will be a lot quicker, because as I say, we dealt with the hard ones first. Lion Park, we're not recommending any change
Yep.
to this reserve. Unless anyone has any comments on any of the issues raised there.
No.
Okay, Taylor's Estate, we do ask something of you for this one. The submissions themselves we believe to be operational in nature, so those are more
Stuff
lovely
coming
ones
my
for
way.
Heather.
Yes.
But for the Taylor's Estate, you may remember that during drafting of the reserve management plan, you requested that we include
For events.
provision, for events so the community will receives and is able to approve or otherwise events to occur on the reserve. So staff wanted just to, I guess, get some guidance on preferences of how that process might run, just to ensure that there's no delay, and because like approving events and waiting for meetings, the delay may affect people's ability to run events that would otherwise be perfectly reasonable, and the community will be happy to allow them. So
I think they should stay right in here. There's more and more things happening. So since our town's been upgraded and since the skate park's gone and the things that we plan to do with this block of land one day, there are more and more opportunities. You take that night market thing, it's only going to get bigger. And they might happen more often. And one day they might flow. And with the cars turning up, with different car groups and different motorcycle groups, and so for a 1 day or 2 day event, and we can convince ourselves not to damage anything out there, and we can manage it, well, I think it should stay in these waters. It doesn't have to go to Thames. For me.
So events don't go to Thames.
That's all
right.
I'm not saying events. Event
so
is too grandiose a word for what I'm talking about. This is someone who works out that something's going to happen, and the business association would think, oh, it's a good idea to do something else with markets or displays, and you've got 2 weeks to organise it.
Yeah.
You want to be fleet-footed enough to be able to do that out of these offices.
That would currently be
So
dealt with by Kirsten
that's
as the
fine.
events coordinator. She would deal with all of those.
Okay, so we're not limiting ourselves to say we've got to go through a process.
So currently, by requiring community approval, that will require a process. And so that's why we were seeking further guidance as to what you suggest that might look like. Is that an email from staff to the community board just to give them a heads up?
Or a formal meeting.
Or is it a formal meeting, or is it somewhere in between? What's the
I
expectation?
What Kirsten does now is we often get an email to say the circus is going to be here, or this is coming, or that's happening. So yeah, maybe that is just enough to sort of say this is what is planned.
Right. So that would, in essence, remove that additional statement from the reserve management plan. So it's something that the community is comfortable with.
But if you want to, Tony, I was just thinking, if you want to give approval to events that go on there, I'm thinking if there's the emergency services, for example, then we'd have to be going back to them saying, or anybody saying you have to apply early enough for us to get that on the agenda for the board to make their approval.
Yeah, I think I'm avoiding that.
And that potentially the way it's worded at the moment that's what it's saying, we would have to go through that formal process, so, if the board want that, sorry, Emma, then we need to set a really sort of big timeline for any of those events coming, and we wouldn't be able to do it on the fly, potentially.
What I'm saying is I'd like to see it relaxed enough so we can do it on the fly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, that would, I guess, the easiest and, most elegant way to do that is just to remove that, policy in its entirety and just, revert to status quo, which is community board staff.
What is it, mate?
Yeah, I think you can do it on the fly because you just send an email around and then just get the approval around 5 minutes later. It's easy to do.
What about
Oh, right, so you're
events
saying
that
approval.
require traffic management?
So you're still saying get
That's
approval?
taken care of through the
Well,
event management process.
Okay,
We
no,
don't
that's
get
cool.
involved in that.
Then I'm
I think it's operating all right, but having been burnt on the concessions, it's only as good as the person that's doing it.
So it will still require a formal report at some stage, potentially.
I don't
No,
want,
what I'm saying is someone,
not a formal.
a bit like when that circus thing turned up with Taylor, whoever it was, someone knew me as a friend of somebody who said, well, I could bring that to town, it'd be great for your town. And it was sort of done pretty informally about, yep, we're happy to go down Buffalo Beach Reserve and stick it up there. And they worried about putting it up in the health, so we didn't have to do anything. We just had to say you can go and use the reserve. And so I'm just saying, likewise, if Alan's phone or someone's phone goes tomorrow to say, we've got something we're doing in, I don't know, Tairua, but we could come here for the next weekend, could we get onto Taylor's Estate? That someone here can evaluate, will it damage the reserve? Is it going to cause any noise? Does it? And we're happy with it, that we just say, yep. And someone here does the necessary paperwork and they turn up and go away, and if they've damaged it, then we give them a bill and they fix it up.
So I think what I'm hearing is the process as it works now seems to be working.
I think
We'd
so.
just like to be kept
The
linked in,
communication.
just linked in a bit more. So perhaps it doesn't need to be an item in this document, but perhaps we can just ask the team, the relevant team, look, we'd just like the heads up when these events are coming.
So it doesn't need approval.
Yeah.
Yes, right.
Yeah, it doesn't need proof, we just like
It
to
just
know.
needs to be in the know.
Because there might be one coming that someone else, like, well, Kirsten might think it's a good idea, but we've got a whole lot of other background information on that operator, says this is the last bloody person we're having in town.
Yeah.
We just want that ability to be able to cut them off if we want to.
To make your comment.
Yeah.
Does that give you clarity?
It does, yeah.
Yeah.
So, to me, that means that we've removed that policy in the reserve management plan, and it's dealt with in an operational manner.
Yeah.
You happy with that, Alan?
And, yeah, okay, good. All right. Buffalo Beach.
Policy B.
Hmm.
So this is north of Tapatapuatia. We're suggesting that we make changes based on several of those
Yeah.
submissions. One submission in particular noted that there's a policy which is actually repeated throughout the document, which says continue to develop partnerships with residents and or local community groups, and I suggested that maybe it's and rather than and or, which is very fair. So we're suggesting that you make that change.
I'd like to see that changed a bit. Reason that, to me, Ngāti Hei have paramount interest in this.
Mm.
We previously had Forest and Bird, and a number have come and think they control it over iwi, which I don't think anyone around this table agreed with. I would like to strengthen, you've got it in the first part, but I would like to strengthen Ngāti Hei's interest in this, because everything we've been to for years and years and years points out their interest more than is paramount. So I'd like to strengthen their interest in this sort of land.
So this piece of land in particular?
So this piece of land in particular, because it, you know, you've got and/or residents with no mention of Ngāti Hei, and I'd like to strengthen that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point.
So maybe develop partnerships with iwi residents.
Do we want to specifically?
Particularly Ngāti Hei, I think.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah.
Because in some other part in this document, I think it was to do with Lovers Rock or somewhere, they say, we are the area in this area, there's no other area, so there won't others excluded. Something I've read somewhere.
Yes,
Yeah.
so that's right.
Yeah, I read a comment, and also in respect of the, I've got down the bottom of page 67, with the yacht club lease. So just to be certain that we are quite safe, I'm safe.
Where's the study, please?
Page 67.
Just above the
Recommendations.
Oh, okay, yep, sorry.
So if we're giving a lease to someone, I think then we have some responsibility for the, security is not the right word, but if we knew something was going to go underwater or flood or there was noise or some other thing would interfere with the, what the people with the lease were going to do. So just to make sure that we don't have a liability that we've given a lease to someone on our land, and if the erosion is such that it eats away their club rooms, that we don't have any liability. Or do we have? That's something I'm just, when I read this.
But that would be the detail of the lease agreement.
No, I'm just asking a question in respect to that. Because we've got an issue there now that has been dealt with now, and has been dealt with for a long time. I don't really want this thing to go out without having me know that we don't have any liability in terms of the boating club assets on our land if our reserve gets eaten away.
I suppose what you're saying, Tony, do we look at a lease or do we look at a licence to occupy that land with no liability?
The yacht club currently has a lease.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
but
a licence to occupy might be a better.
Might be a better way with no liability. You know, they can just occupy that land.
That's
what you're raising.
It's just that that's going to be coming up. It's something that's going to be on our plate. Well, it's not currently. It is on our plate right now, and it's something that's being dealt with right now, and it's something that's not going away. So I don't know, Alan, you might be able to cast some light on it. Like, under this, would we have any liability if they boating club come down there tomorrow morning and half their assets gone?
Yeah, I don't know. We need to check with our legal people to get a clear definition on that.
So okay, I suggest we do that because we sign this thing off.
At the end of the day, I would have thought.
Well, this thing is different to that.
They would have read back to the terms and conditions of the lease, I would have thought.
Okay.
Rather than the reserve management plan in terms of what our liability is.
And the reserve management plan has in that paragraph erosion is
managed via that
issue.
But I think it brings up the other question of whether we look at leases or whether we just say you have a licence to occupy with no conditions.
Yeah, I don't think that that's something that we can cover in the reserve management plan. All we're doing is highlighting that there is an issue with coastal erosion there. The lease and whether we issue a lease or a licence to occupy is a separate process, so, and not something that we can cover in this. Yeah, but good point, Tony.
Right, so next one off the rank is the south of Thames-Coromandel. So similar, I guess, updating this to be consistent with north of Thames-Coromandel in relation to the recategorisation, and just being more explicit with the vandalism stepping on the trees.
Looks like one of our signs may be close to heading into the water as well there.
I think it was the wind, eh? I think it was wind, or was it?
I don't know. No, I don't think it's vandalised. I think it's just a bit of erosion and, yeah, one of our don't chop down our trees signs.
I have real problems putting native trees that previously been destroyed and vandalised the reserve in the background include a policy related to placement of future trees and reserve management plan. Is that a wise thing to put in there?
Make some signal that we're not going to put up with people vandalising our trees.
I suppose wondering why, because we've sat on our hands and actually done nothing to replace trees for a number of years now.
So it's in the background, it doesn't
I know
compel council to do anything.
And I'd also like to see maybe hay struck in here that's still part of it here. That's part of that.
But no, this is south of
Yeah, don't they still go right down to
Oh,
the
well, it does, yeah, but it's not like Tapu like the north.
Not the north part, yeah, okay.
But I think adding Ngāti Hei in, because there is that statement of continue to develop partnerships in this one as well. And so I'd say that's a change that we would
I'd be happy to see it. I think they'd be happy to see it.
And you're also potentially changing it from neighbourhood to cultural heritage.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Where's that?
Yeah, in the
Page
box.
68,
To yourself.
Oh, yeah, okay.
the middle one there.
Because when we get to the next page, I think we should do nothing with cultural heritage till we get more information. The minute you have that in there, you've got some serious limitations. So if you want to have the walkway carry on around there for some reason at a later date, and it's a hopping path, you won't be able to do it probably.
So we're talking about long.
No,
Yeah.
Oh, so,
I'm talking about
yeah,
long,
sorry, we
so-
skipped ahead. So,
Yeah, no, if that's okay, so we're
So-
happy with Buffalo?
yeah, just the
Yep.
adding of Ngāti Hay
yeah.
into that,
Yeah.
and then we're on to 3.8.
So this harks back to the discussion that we had
Yeah.
earlier. So are you wanting to revisit the?
Well, right now,
recommendation
I
that
wouldn't want to
we-
see, I'd leave it as neighbourhood reserve myself until you've had that discussion. And just to make sure that you're not going to limit. So Minister Ngāti Hay are very supportive of the walkway around the place.
Yeah, they are, yeah.
And if that walk, from Stella Everett, and you eventually want to keep coming around here, then you'll be limited if you have cultural heritage.
So the category will not limit development on that reserve. It's a tool for management, and it should nod to the fact that there is it's a special place for Ngāti Hay, and they have indicated that to us, and they've also indicated that they are supportive of the boardwalk.
Just as an aside too, when we met with Heritage New Zealand up about these reserves, they weren't just talking about the Māori this cultural significance. They also talked about the long farming practice in history as well. And so the management plan that we're working on, and we're waiting for a plan to have a look at, I'm sure is going to encapsulate a lot of that history. So that might be reassuring to Mr. Harsent as well when we have the conversation with him.
Okay, so.
Yeah.
Okay,
So there is going to be something that sits above this, but outside of this document, which gives this area a special management, and it's being worked on with Heritage New Zealand and Longreach, and although not so much Longreach have put the initial process.
I'm just mindful at the moment, it's a lot more flexible under neighbourhood reserve. If this thing goes through and it just says we recategorise, so when this document gets approved, it won't be neighbourhood, it'll be cultural heritage. That will seriously limit and will make the process to do anything so much more lengthy and expensive. So I just want us to be very, very sure what it will do and what it won't do, because, but yeah, I take on board that you are going to have that discussion, and when this document comes back to council, I'll be asking, has that discussion been had and where is the outcome before I put my hand up, because it's something that could slip under the radar with ease. And having dealt myself with stuff through district plan processes, the word heritage goes in it, I tell you.
It doesn't show you Tapuaʻi there.
I don't mind Tapuaʻi, that's okay. This is really quite different. Tapuaʻi has been there for centuries. Everyone understands it's the most important bit of land in our district, in Ngāti Hay. We all understand the significance of it. This bit is very different. This is an old farm that's now got a subdivision on it, and there was a midden, and that's not miles, it's hundreds of yards away, where this reserve is. And what will happen with people getting access to the estuary? Like I've looked at it, I hear the concerns that people have. That's all. And it is such a nice place. We might one day decide we will put a barbecue down there for people to go down and enjoy that with their kids. But you won't be able to.
Well, that's the purpose of this plan that we're developing, is to factor in those things, Tony, and decide whether we can make allowance in the management plan for something like that. I think the other thing is that the category cultural heritage is different to the reserve classification. So if you have a reserve that's classified as historic, then sure, yeah, you are pretty limited what you can do. This is actually another step underneath. So this is actually providing the day-to-day, the way we manage on a day-to-day basis, this reserve. It's not as restrictive.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
You'll have that discussion with Colin.
Yeah. So we'll bring further information to the council.
You'll have a pen there, won't you? I'll give you his number now.
I think Esther's given it to Derek.
Okay, I'm happy.
So Faith, just a quick question, which might sort of add to this. So if you change the classification to historic, that would stop anything happening, wouldn't it?
Yes.
But by cultural heritage, it's not as.
Yeah, not as limited.
Not as binding, yeah.
So it wouldn't stop either. That's the thing. It wouldn't stop. It would just mean that there'd be lot more consideration. Would need to be given to any kind of, and we're talking development, and we're talking like probably major development. So there's all sorts of things that come into play when it's a historic reserve. But anyway, that's.
That drives us to talk to Joe before we do anything, and that's it.
Yeah.
That's right.
So for the balance, given that we will,
That's right.
we'll just do further investigation and bring that to council before it's finally adopted. Is there anything else on that reserve?
I'm right.
No.
Any concerns there? Right, okay, next one is Robinson Road, which did get quite a lot of interest through submissions and quite a lot of conflicting information. So this is one where we've included quite a lot of info because of the nature of the submissions.
Emma, may I ask a question? On the Ngāti Hay provided the feedback around there being a bridge.
Yes.
I thought we had that bridge and that bridge just needed to be installed. Does anyone else have that
Yes, my thing.
recollection?
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, go on, right. But no, that's our understanding as well, so that's.
What is the delay in installing the bridge?
So Joe thought that it was potentially the GFC in 2009 that sort of the global financial crisis was stopped the development because we needed to
Stop the developer doing it.
tighten pockets and.
So the developers meant to pay for the bridge to go in?
No, not necessarily.
Because at the moment, it's accessible only to the general public by water.
Yes.
And a couple of landowners verge onto it and can access it from private property.
And we mow it. Council mows it and maintains it.
Yes.
And it's used by a very small handful of people.
And there is a bridge over there, which is one put by the private people, which is the back of where John Van Hemmetjes lived, and was the shortcut over to these other houses on the other side. Now, on the South Highway. So where the intake, or the outlet comes from the waterways under the South Highway, and it's that creek. Yeah. Well, on the back of the house, because that's where Aaron's selling the rental property down there. If you go to the back of that, there is quite a good bridge that goes over there now. But it's not down the entrance.
I think waterways are meant to run on that bridge. I seem to remember something.
Oh, that was well before my time, but this is something we need to.
Yeah, and mine, Murray.
The grey matter is taking a ploughing right now.
I seem to remember years ago this coming up in Nadia and waterways were supposed to do that. You probably remember that here too.
Yeah. Joe said to me that was originally true. Joe did say to me that when they originally were doing the consent for waterways, there was discussion about putting a bridge across and also putting the depot at the entrance, which didn't happen. So council have long talked about bridging across to it as part of the proposal to do the Robinson Road walk.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then that would terminate in a bridge that went across to that reserve, that made that reserve more
Agreed.
accessible and user-friendly for people to go there. So at the moment, it seems quite exclusive, doesn't it? Because it's limited access.
That's correct.
It's also
Originally
noted
small
that
payments.
the residents have been maintaining the reserve.
Yes, so the residents who submitted, they identified themselves as such. They had offered that they continue to maintain the reserve on behalf of council.
Because we've not actually known that one.
So I believe there's one of the submitters noted that the council uses his driveway as an access to reserve currently for the mowing. I believe it's an agreement between him and council.
There's quite a few gardens.
Likewise, there was-
They look after those.
There were
Not on their
submissions
property, so.
in the same vein around concerns of removal of maybe trees and other flora that shouldn't be removed. So maintenance is in the eye of the beholder. And there's concern that there's been certain unsuitable exotics planted there in lieu of native trees which have been removed and the removal of mangroves. So what I'm trying to say is it's a really complex issue.
And encroachment.
Things happening
Yes,
on the
yes,
reserve.
encroachment.
Which is quite a bit.
Yes.
The good news for this reserve management plan is that we don't need to mention any proposed development on the site, because that is something that's dealt with through work programs and operational decisions by council and community board. And the other issues that were raised regarding encroachment, removal of vegetation, maintenance issues, and access are all dealt with through the general policies document. So there's not many changes required as a result of the submissions, but it is something that will be need to be flagged to the community board and the area office staff.
Mhm.
One thing that is considered that is worthwhile changing is moving it into the cultural heritage section because of the rich nature of the specific sites, especially to Ngati Hay on that reserve, which was referenced by several submissions.
So the next two are pretty much similar, aren't they, in terms of picking up Ngati Hay's?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, exactly.
So that would be.
And also heritage.
Yes.
So happy with Lud's Rock and Stone's
Yes.
Lawn. Wonderful. So moving on to.
Sorry, can I just make a suggestion on that? I think in there, I think it's Lynn, it refers to Tame Whenua. Perhaps you should refer to Ngati Hay rather than Tame Whenua.
Where is that? Sorry.
So I saw it like part of it.
Or maybe Manawhānau, just to be.
And the actual document itself.
Explain the difference to me later.
Which reserve was that?
The rules and version.
The instruction. Wonderful, thank you.
So 3.12, which is Tapu Tapu Atia Stream, are we at? Is that where we're all at?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just running down that change. There's a really big delay on the big screen. Sorry, Jeremy, I was supposed to occasionally make sure that you weren't sitting patiently with your hand up. Did you get anything so far?
All good, thank you.
And you're asleep yet?
Trying to stay awake.
Yeah, man. What time's racing tomorrow?
Must be 2 in the morning.
Yeah.
It's practice racing tomorrow, official practice racing, so I'll be right.
All right.
By the time I get it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Again, this one is there were submissions related to the background of the reserve, just providing a bit more information, and just a tweak to the categorisation from recreation and ecological linkages to cultural heritage. Any concerns about that one at all, or?
Nope.
Jack, Recreation Reserve.
That seems pretty straightforward, particularly around bird life.
Oh, I'm running a bit behind on these ones. I'm just going to skip through because we're approving these, and I'm just going to go by exception rather than trying to write an A on everything.
Okay.
And I'll backfill. So it's just taking a while to catch up to me. All right.
Centennial Heights.
Centennial Heights.
Yeah.
Again, just a change to the background just to make it a wee bit more accurate as to what's happening.
Angapara.
Christensen Reserve.
Yep. Just yell out if anyone's got any comments.
Cook Speech Central Reserve.
Mm-hmm.
13.
So, concerns relating to access and parking.
That all seems pretty straightforward.
Cook Speech Full Reserve.
Encroachment.
So that's just being explicit with the issues.
Yeah.
In the reserve. The reserve management plan won't move to suggest a solution to the encroachment, but can absolutely note that it's occurring.
Mm-hmm.
And just for the board, that encroachment is not around the hall as such. That reserve carries on towards Blacksmore Bay behind
Yes.
behind the houses there. So that's kind of more where we're talking about encroachment.
Is that the one that we looked at on the map?
We looked and I went round the side of the stream. Yeah.
Yeah. So Hahe Beach Village Green, 25 submission points received on this, so it was a relatively popular one. Most of the submissions were around the list of potential future developments that were included in the reserve management plan. We're proposing that list be removed and instead reshape the reserve management plan to note what the proposed developments were aiming to resolve, what the issues were, and that just enables the community board and council to prioritise and decide what potential developments they want in the reserve without the reserve management plan getting ahead of itself. Because obviously any changes made on that reserve would require some specific consultation about a specific proposal, rather than it sort of being a vague list of maybes.
Are you happy with that, Jeremy?
Yeah, totally.
Hilton Park,
Oh, yes.
not recommending any changes to that.
Yep.
A few people who also submitted on Robinson Road mentioned that the hours in the toilets should be extended. We investigated that, and there's some antisocial behaviour occurring around those toilets, which is resolved by the toilets being closed. But I believe Sue pops down and sends as much as she possibly can.
Okay.
It's more of an operational issue, isn't it?
Yeah.
I guess it was more, we wanted to include that information to answer that question. Yeah. Kahuri Whenua.
Mm-hmm. That recommendation around the playground and its proximity to the road is pretty important.
Yes, yeah. So are you happy with that change?
I am.
Yeah, I do.
Yep.
Again, it's just something, I guess, something that we missed when we were drafting. We don't want to prescribe a solution. We want to describe the issue, what's occurring, and then allow priorities and specific community preferences to guide the solution.
Okay.
Kotahi Reserve.
Emma, can I just ask a couple of questions around this?
Absolutely.
Just regarding this, obviously, from my reading of the new wording, obviously there's a lot of interest in this potential relocation of the Whirianga skate park into that reserve. Does that wording allow that in the submission you received? Is anyone against it?
Let me just find the.
I didn't read any, but.
Let me just double check that so I can be sure. So you're saying that you want to ensure that there's nothing that stops
That going
going ahead.
It says there, providing for a range of active and passive recreational activities.
Yeah.
It's a neighbourhood reserve which allows for that kind of activity. It's classified as recreation, which again allows for that. So there's nothing in this reserve management plan which would prevent.
So for that skate ramp to be installed on that reserve, is there any consultation, or could that be a non-notified activity into that reserve?
Given that there's, the council knows that there's quite a high level of interest from the community, the significance of engagement policy would require council to at least engage with the immediately affected people. I would say, but that would require some analysis from staff on the specific issue.
The group, the skate group and Hahe, for want of a better name for them, have put in an expression of interest for that. And it's just waiting on the reserve management plan finalisation so that we can start having more in-depth conversations around how that would occur.
Yeah, and everyone's comfortable that this wording would allow for that.
Yeah, I guess that's my question. I sat in that meeting. There was a town meeting, probably the most attended meeting that I've certainly seen in Hahe, for a lot of support for it from young and old. So I really just want to make sure that the wording around this would allow that to happen.
Yeah, I mean, council definitely can't contract out of their requirements under the Local Government Act to consult with affected people, and they've made themselves very known to council. So there's absolutely a requirement to consult further.
Yeah, I just I agree. There's nothing in that wording that would stop that particular project. It's broad enough to allow for a skate ramp on that reserve, and given that that's the purpose of that reserve, as far as the Reserves Act goes, there's nothing that would stop that particular project happening on that reserve if that was what council decided was the best thing to do.
Okay, thanks, Faith.
So next, the Kotonu Recreation Reserve.
That's
again, just Heritage New Zealand helping us out there.
Yep.
The Kotonu Sports Domain, not recommending any change there. A very comprehensive submission from the Domain Board.
Yes.
Providing quite a lot of backgrounds to the history of the reserve before council took on management of the area. We've kept the background, I guess, the same as other reserves, just because I mean we could have pages and pages of information. So we've kept it at a high level, but that information is certainly helpful to check to make sure we've got it right.
Okay. No comments? No.
We've dealt with Margaret Place, so we can skip on by. Bowie Park Reserve, Tony, you had something to discuss on this one, I remember.
Oh, that was we just taken a look at ourselves to potential future use for that reserve. And so I pick up the submitter about community housing.
Yes. Community marae.
But the important one is the community marae.
Yeah.
And I think there'll be a lot of support for that because it provides an accommodation hub potentially for major sporting and cultural events held at Bowie Park. So
good location.
So the reserve management plan, we don't want to go as far as prescribing a result, but currently it states that as a management action to investigate the potential use of the reserve for other activities, which explicitly leaves the door open for alternative use.
Yeah, that's right. And out of all that, that's for me personally, if I agree with that, it would be the community marae, which I think would serve a number of purposes and add significant value to Bowie Park. So I'm seriously in that camp.
Wonderful. the reserve management plan will definitely enable that conversation.
Yes, that's great.
To occur.
Good.
Waimara Reserve.
Yep.
Just a wee bit information around various animals and birds living on the reserve, including pests. Kerry Chapman, just a wee bit more info around the infrastructure of the reserve and how it interacts with the neighbouring dune environment. Pumpkin Flat. We did have some submissions on freedom camping on this reserve, which is of course outside the scope of this reserve management plan. We just consider it appropriate just to update the nature of the restoration happening on that reserve to be floodplain. Purangi Reserve. Just had some information around erosion, encroachment, etc. Rabbit Way, and feel free to stop me if anything.
No, keep going.
Rabbit Way, I think the issue there is might be some pests, but this is one, there's no access to or out of it. If it ever catches fire, you can't get an appliance into it. It is full of dead and dying native trees and noxious weeds. So there's nothing about managing the wild ginger and other stuff that's in there. Makes reference to, this is one that's right opposite me, so I see it every day of my life and I'm very conversant with it.
And it's
Delhi was on one end of it for a while too, so.
It's quite big, isn't it?
No, it's a fire hazard, eh? It's just a major fire hazard.
It definitely is.
So would you suggest that an addition of access being an issue?
It absolutely is. I would say this is a scrub bit of land where that development was done.
Yes.
But some of our house we have as a reserve. No one has ever been in there. That is nothing more. Well, no, it's nothing more than a piece of land that's on a steep access. No one can get into it or out of it. And it's full of old iron and bloody dead and dying trees. And we have always said, if that goes up in smoke, there is no appliance can get, you can't get into it.
And it's hazardous to the surrounding houses.
And it's surrounded by houses.
Right.
So for me, the issue is not so much the rats that are in there, it's the wild ginger and the other rubbish that's in there.
Fuel, isn't it? Fuel.
Yeah. I don't know what we do with the best and do we bulldoze and.
Can we sell it?
Yeah, can you sell it? Yeah.
Good bush skills.
Yeah, that'd be nice to do for that. Anyhow.
So, just comment, so I think it's more of what you're raising is an operational issue.
Yeah.
Rather than a reserve management plan issue, but it's something we should, perhaps, yeah, there is a piece of budget, isn't there?
Okay, I don't know.
That we should perhaps recommend Derek to have a look at it.
And we can definitely note them as issues.
Yeah,
Issues in the background,
Yeah, so we'll just note plant pests and I will bring up some wording around access and.
I raise it because the section, the block of land that's the interest puts for tender right now, that would be sold and subdivided. And because that's there too, so now there's going to be potentially another 10 or 15 or 20 houses going there. And we should be thinking about that when they do that, that somehow there's access or there's enough water or something that catches fire. But it's all dead carnuka and stuff like that. When it goes, it'll be gone before the fire engine turns up.
Okay, so you got those comments? Yeah.
Okay, so next is School Road Reserve. Some great submissions there, and just making the reserve.
Now, I'd like to talk about School Road.
Yeah.
Because we only heard 2 submissions, and this has been around a long time, like over a decade. And this community board has been steadfast, they want to keep that land not for, because it's the only 6,000 square metres of land, green space that is going to be there for the future.
Right.
And I would like to see that land unequivocally left as green space, because going down the track in another 20 years, we're gradually heading up Taylor's mistake. We've put the skateboard park on there now. We've got that, and then we're going to have nothing to mow on. And I think we've got to look at the future, and I'm right against, whilst I look at mow for pensioner housing out there, I'm right against this piece.
Okay. So
I'm speaking for myself. I don't want to see it, and it's up to the board, but I don't want to see it anything there about putting it into pensioner housing or anything like that.
okay. So we wouldn't go to that extent.
Others can comment.
Yeah, but the change that we had proposed was removing the action which said using a collaborative approach, work with the leaseholder to enable a wider range of events and activities to occur on the reserve. And we replaced it with investigate the potential use of this reserve for other activities. Would you prefer to retain the original?
I think the original, when we talk about events and activities, it's a big green space, it's close to town,
For
it's
events and
certainly,
activity.
you know.
It's an acre and a half. You can
Except
you
the
can put events in there.
the new wording does make it quite open to
Yes,
anything.
to anything, yeah.
And doesn't preclude us if, because as part of a stormwater solution, which will like to be a lake or something else, but this doesn't preclude us managing a stormwater issue we have in that area.
I had a very good conversation with someone last week, and I think it was Ian, I was talking about blocking that off and all the stormwater flows.
Looking at
How we blocked off that stormwater
Yeah.
flows through School Road and all that through, it's quite good, yeah. Council did that, you know, I think Tony's right, I think there's some possible ways we can alleviate stormwater with that other piece, but.
It's just, I'm just thinking that that's an issue that we've got, it's a major issue. But that bit of land might be part of the solution, and I'd hate to think that we missed the opportunity, that we cut ourselves off through this plan to be able to use it without going through another.
the original wording, I think
so
is
we'll
what we're
retain the original wording.
heading towards.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, thank you.
Were you going to?
Do you hear it,
Looking at the time.
No, we're gonna punch on through.
Punch on through, wonderful. Next one is Te Ao Tini.
Yep.
Can we close this? It's going to be brave. So again, making some changes to the background to reflect what's happening on the reserve, but the majority of those being flipped through to Heather. Village Green. Just around shade, which of course the trees were removed to create open space. Just making a change, adding that partnership approach that's occurring on that reserve.
Yep.
To Tani Reserve. Just noting that there's encroachment specifically happening on this reserve, again dealt with through the general policies, but worth noting as an issue. White Street Reserve.
Yep.
Coastal forest, that was interesting.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm glad you found it interesting, Heather, because it's coming your way.
Why?
Mercury,
Yes.
Kairere Reserve. Some feedback from Ngāti Hei, mainly around the naming of that reserve, which was really wonderful.
Absolutely it is.
The bird and flighter of bird that brings good news is it's lovely to have that translation in the background of the reserve management plan too.
And because the bay, my understanding is that Front Beach and Flaxmore Bay, that bay is Maramara, Tortora, and the hill is not specifically.
So we call it the Marama Totara Trap, but that's not right.
Joe's saying it would be better called Mana Karere than that, because That's about the milling of the totara, and that would have been down on the beach. My understanding, I could have it slightly wrong, but.
Okay, good to know.
We're guided by him.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the,
Absolutely.
Okay, on the Portal Reserve. So Ngāti Hay provided some feedback that was historically significant. So we are making changes based on that, namely just removing the fact that there's an issue with lack of parking, because we don't necessarily want there to be parking on that significant site. So,
no, exactly.
And there's parking on the other side of the road.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Bluff Road Reserve.
Yes.
And just updating the, noting that there's an erosion issue there. Stormont Lane, Buffalo Beach. Just a lovely submission of support, which is always nice to receive.
Great.
Central Dune Reserve. And we're just recommending no change because those submission the submissions, the issues raised in the submission dealt with through the general policies document.
Okay.
Cookstream, Esplanade. Just some information updating the background. Egan's Reserve. And just noting that there's a partnership approach taken to pest, plant and animal management.
And it should be people.
And
Pest people.
Was it
Egan's Park.
two-legged pest.
Yeah, I'm not too sure what the partnership, who the partnership would be
Yeah.
with, but I guess.
Okay, no, that all seems good. Endeavour Reserve.
Endeavour Reserve. This, there was a response from the community on the transit street beach access, which of course has been dealt with operationally and continues to be dealt with operationally. And we heard in the hearings that people who were concerned about that issue were quite happy with the pedestrianisation along the side, making it safer. So we can update the reserve management plan to reflect that there's now a pedestrian access.
Good.
And of course, flicking the remaining operational issues through to
Heather.
Pandora Esplanade.
I'd like to write my resignation letter while I'm here.
I beat you to it.
It did.
So just updating the background to just be more explicit with how it's used and who lives there, as in animals, birds. Hay Esplanade rather. There's just noting a lack of signage there, just due to there's been a perception that it's a private facility. Hot Water Beach Reserve, and just noting that there's an issue around weed control, so just recommending no change as it's operational. Jack Mills Reserve. Now this is one that did receive quite a lot of submissions on this one. You may recall that the community board took it out to the community to see what they would think about. There was a definite response to that. So asking the community board to give some direction on what the preference is. We haven't made any changes to the document as yet because we wanted that to be a governance decision. So interested in your thoughts.
Turn it into money.
Yeah, I mean, we listened to the deliberations. Lots of folks came in and spoke about retaining it then, didn't they?
You say for what?
It's a,
Water
yeah.
storage tank underneath it.
Yeah.
Would ownership affect the water storage tank if it was dock ownership or?
That would be one of the issues that would be investigated, because of course disposing of land is a process
Yes.
in itself.
I think we should leave it there.
Right, so to retain the investigate to revoke.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
And of course it doesn't, the process enables the people who are wanting to submit, they will have the opportunity to submit again.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, wonderful.
All right.
Okay.
Still a work.
I think that's
Faith.
Let's pass it away there. Ko tahuri ki te rangi reserve or Wigmore Stream. One of the main changes you'll see is that we've swapped it round, and so that today was going first, but we're retaining Wigmore Stream in there, just for people who may not be familiar with that name. Again, many comments around the managed specifically with the general policies RMP, so just suggesting that we make some changes to the background just to be a bit more accurate with what the riparian planting is achieving.
Okay, thank you.
Maramara Tōpura Bay Reserve.
Which is the beachfront, isn't it?
Yep, front beach. So this is the other side. So suggesting that we add some issues and just to reflect as test parts, and that there's the stormwater drainage is just one factor causing erosion rather than what was previously there that indicated that it was the only reason. Marine Parade Reserve.
Yeah.
Again, just noting the bird life there and flicking the rest of them through together. Mercury Beach East Reserve. Suspension and support. Nice. Meditatai. Lights are referenced in the reserve management plan. They are consistent with the purpose of the reserve, and that's from the Reserves Act. It's not a judgment call made by staff or by council. And whether or what happens with that is, of course, being dealt with through the long-term plan.
Yes.
So the reserve management plan can just merely state that it's there and that it's inconsistent with purpose. What happens to it beyond that is the reserve management plan doesn't need to contemplate that.
Do you feed that in as part of the LTP that they're not compliant in terms of?
Faith, was that message communicated at all? Sorry, Faith.
Or is it just well documented amongst the council?
Was the fact that the Mollocks are inconsistent with the use of the reserve communicated as part of the long-term planning process?
I'm not sure about the long-term plan process, to be honest. I know it's been communicated a number of times through other processes.
Okay, interesting. Thank you.
Also, this one here has note that encroachment has occurred.
Yes.
Now, I haven't seen that. I might have missed it, but I haven't seen it. Say at Manarangi on Beach Reserve, where there is encroachment, where in fact there's encroachment on many of our reserves.
Yes.
So if I go around Robinson Road, there is encroachment there.
Yeah.
And yet this is the first time I see it. So I'm just wondering if we need to, where we know there's encroachment, if we don't note that on each of our reserves.
Oh, it has been.
I've missed that until now.
So where it's been raised as a specific issue by submitters, we've noted it, especially when it's very visible or where it's maybe a structure or quite significant encroachment. But the more garden variety encroachment where it may have just been a misunderstanding of boundary, or the garden.
Take Buffalo Beach, the reserve we spoke about, and the homeowners wall. There is significant encroachment in that land.
Yeah, so I believe that's noted in that reserve management plan. Yeah, but for the balance of reserves where it's not stated, it's covered in the general policies RMP.
That's right.
Okay, but just saying note that encroachment has occurred doesn't suggest any action.
No, so the action
is
the general policies.
Okay, and there's been operational issue.
Yeah.
So, but it's, I guess noting it as an issue,
Yeah.
flags it,
Yeah.
puts it above, its head above the parapet.
Okay,
For the
fine.
community board to then say,
Fine.
okay, what do we do?
So it's a different process if one chooses to deal.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comment around
No.
community time?
No,
Multikorori Parade,
Yes.
I don't even know where that is.
So this is the
Stormwater
stormwater.
Ponds, Cook's Beach.
So the submissions are entirely about the stormwater ponds and, which are, while in the middle of the reserve, they're not included. We just purely deal with the land as they are an asset,
Okay.
an infrastructure asset, don't need to be contemplated by the reserve management plan. So those ones will actually probably flip to Bruce as well.
Yeah.
Old South Highway Esplanade. No changes recommended to that. We've got encroachment is already noted as an issue, and the fact that it affects access means that I guess it's elevated beyond just relying on the general policies, which is why that's there. All right.
the stuff we looked at the back of, for the land that was sold, the encroachment on that road ran from there back to, west of the dump. We went and looked at there, for the one to buy. Into back of the dump club.
Yeah.
So again, I think that's our road, but there is encroachment right out on both sides.
Is that from all the businesses along there? Right,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
So all that metal and sand and stuff is out on our road.
Yeah, I believe that's currently, our roading team are currently dealing with some
Okay,
situations.
I'm just,
Okay,
But yes, good to know because it has been raised several times recently.
Okay.
True.
Move
well,
on
open seal it
forward.
moved,
yep,
open seal it out.
Talker. Some submissions from both Mercury and Heritage New Zealand.
Just to clarify, is that the one at this end or the far end of Orchid?
Which one are we talking about, the bluff one?
The Rātoka.
Just around the corner from Moore Crescent Reserve, that's the little steep bluff.
Oh, gotcha.
I think you can walk down to it from up at the top of Ahina Drive or.
yeah, that was the one you surprised us with, that no one really knew was a reserve.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Surprise reserve.
We have a few of those.
yeah,
It keeps on giving.
okay,
Generous developers.
generous. Skipper's Reserve,
One in particular I want to mention to you is that one submitter noted as part of the development that we're doing on their own section, which is nearby Skippers, there was a pre-European skeleton found, which is pretty archaeologically significant. So while it's not on the reserve itself, we've noted that in the area there's been koiwi tangata found, which is te reo, we've put both in the reserve management plan.
So it was found on a private section?
Yes, on 16 Skippers Road.
wow,
Found
Yes.
we tried a long reach on that one there, so they found one there of a baby too, when they did the archaeological work up there, probably a little Marai side was.
Yeah.
So quite a few changes to this, just to better reflect what the reserve is up to. And I guess noting, because there were a lot of submissions on the public toilet there, and again, we want to avoid prescribing solutions where possible. And the submitters have suggested that maybe referring reserve users to nearby facilities would be more appropriate. So we've noted that. We're recommending that we note that. Sleeman's, not
No change?
No change, because they're just supporting
Yep.
what we've got in the reserve management plan, which is still protecting the colours as much as the reserve management plan can. The South End Reserve, just noting that there's been some vandalism of the trees, so similar to other reserves where that's been an issue.
Okay.
Waiwiri Stream Reserve.
Right, this is the dog exercising issue.
Yes.
All right.
So there's some requests that are outside the scope of the reserve
Yeah,
management
that will
plan.
go to the
And that's been dealt with through
Brian
bylaws, isn't it?
and his team.
Yes.
Mm.
Yep.
But again, helpful information to have.
Yes.
And we can't expect submitters to understand the intricacies of the bureaucracy
Yep.
and the different documents. I'm running out of words.
Which page are we on? Sorry.
So page
94.
94 of the
94, yes.
agenda. Yeah, we're getting there. Yep. We're getting there.
Yep, I think that's a good recommendation.
Great. It's not inconsistent with the general policies, but there is a specific request. There's no point in, not being consistent with other approaches. The estimate, just requesting some best practice of the management of Phoenix Palms, which of course are pretty nasty little beasties. And of course, being an operational matter, we'll just have to make sure that I'm sure they're very well aware of how to deal with those, but we'll make sure that they are focused on the submissions. The Pines, which is in Masoni West, just requesting that there's more planting, given that the planting has been vandalised. So we'll just note that there was vandalism. We're not going to suggest more planting because there's an operational issue.
Yeah, and that's in hand, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, again, that's an operational issue.
Right, so we have come to the end of the individual reserve management plans. So now we're into Appendix B, which are they're still reserves, but they are included in Appendix B as they are not maintained, maybe because they're inaccessible or there's no public usage or just low recreational value. We had submissions on pest plant and weed control and access, which are both can be dealt with through operational methods. So out of scope submissions, there were a lot of submissions out of scope again when we asked for feedback on reserves in the area. We're down to get a range of different things that the reserve management plan can't contemplate.
Yes.
So that long list there is the list of the specific issues that were raised. Just proposing one change in Appendix C, which is the reserves that look like reserves. Well, sorry, they're not reserves. They're open space, but they may look like reserves.
Yeah.
To someone who doesn't have access to land status information like we do. And they're included just for completeness. So we're just going to make a little note that there's some informal beach accesses because it's it adds to the completeness of the information.
Sorry, would you put that just specifically informal beach accesses have been created over the Jack Moss Beach Front? Because I guess there's other open spaces that are in the same situation. Would it be better to be more generic, or are you specifically relating that to that little structure thing that we can see on Jack Moss?
I think yeah, because it's there's going to be informal accesses all over the dunes, but I think for that one it was a little bit more of an issue.
More specific.
Which is why we thought to include that there. Right, and that is That's all.
Thank you, Emma. That's a marathon.
All of a sudden we're at the end.
That was a marathon effort.
Yes,
Thank you.
yeah, so I've just taken everything has been approved, and then where you've given specific direction, I've noted that. I will ensure that we touch base with Colin, Tony, and that you've got that information on the long reach available to you when you proceed as part of council for
That's right.
deliberations.
I read Colin's might recommend this says what's going to happen, and Brian's on to turn up with a planner if needs be, so.
I think you might have some resolutions to.
Yes, I've got them right in front of me. So did we get a mover and seconder for the report? No, we didn't do that, sorry. You can have a mover and seconder for the
I'm happy to
report.
move that report.
Thank you, Tony, seconded by
I'll
Bill.
second. Thank you.
And then recommends that council adopt the proposed amendments with those
With those changes.
tweaks and changes that we had.
Must be moved Jeremy, remember?
Are you awake, Jeremy?
Yes.
God, but we'll never be awake for
We're
tomorrow.
giving you
You
permission.
moved that.
Yeah, you've moved that. We're giving you permission to go to bed now.
And I'm all right. I'll stay for a little bit longer.
All right, okay. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Carried.
We'll have lunch now.
Well done.
Much.
Thank you.
Well done.
You needed a decent book, Jeremy.
I don't know.
Sorry, Jeremy, you can't move that because you had a conflict at the start.
That's right.
Yeah, okay, fantastic. All right, the next, we can do a couple real quickly and then maybe Jeremy will not, I see Alan's not here, but we could do the name, the proposed road name.
Yeah, maybe I'll move that.
Yeah, Wairari Road, item
Yeah.
4.1. Moved by Tony, seconded by Murray. All those in favour?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Okay, so there, we've done that. Hahe visitor car park. See when Alan comes back.
Have lunch.
Okay, we're going to break for lunch now, Jeremy, because
Have lunch.
Alan's not here right now to do item 3.3.
I'm just going to grab one from there if you want to do that now, because lunch isn't here on our phone.
Oh, lunch has not arrived, so we're just trying to get Alan back. So that's item 3.3, page 278. Hahe visitor car park kiosk.
I'll move that.
Okay, moved by
Kiosk,
Tony.
isn't it?
Yes. Seconded by
Delhi?
Delhi. Any discussion? All those in favour?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Carried. What was that one? Approves in principle the development of the visitor kiosk. Okay,
Right, I didn't mean to after all that one.
all right, which takes us to item 4.2, which is our work program.
Oh, work program, you mind.
And that is on page 287. Can I please have a mover and a seconder to receive the report?
I'll move.
Moved by Bill, seconded by Tony. Right, let's talk.
Good afternoon.
Hello, Bruce.
Yeah, so we're getting through the year. We're getting pretty close to the end of the year. We're getting a few things changing to blue, which is good. There's a few risks on there still. There's a few issues, but overall I'm fairly comfortable with the way things are going and happy to take any questions.
Yes, Murray.
So the sheriff block report, when are we going to get that back?
It's a workshop coming up.
That we in the workshop? Good. Second question, transfer station.
You beat me to it.
Yes. We're talking waste on the workshop too, aren't we?
Mm-hmm.
So are we going to get a comprehensive report on where that is at the workshop?
We could look at pulling something together for that, yeah.
Because I believe there's an urgency now in that matter.
Sure.
So I'd like to get something back at the workshop. Let's just leave it at that.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you've got any thoughts on that, Ellen, or.
Even if we could just Yeah, we'll talk to, will you do it later?
Yeah, we need to touch base with Andrew.
Yeah, we do,
Find out where he's at and
Yeah, exactly.
the other agencies and the funding side of it. And
Yeah, but we know there's lots of discussions going on. So there's things happening, but I hear what you're saying about trying to bring something, coordinated back to let you understand. It's fine, it's fine.
It might not be really appropriate here, but if that was raised, but at our council meeting for the deliberations for the LTP and with waste, particularly with molluscs, the more I think, I still have concerns that there's a whole lot of issues around the district with the rubbish, and molluscs, one of them. And we're picking up a few of them, but not the lot. And I just have a feeling in my mind that without a comprehensive review of how we deal with waste, there's potential we open ourselves up. And I've only had that discussion with Sandra and other people, I suppose, before our next meeting. But where we were going, for instance, take the molluscs out of Wanapawa and Apedo, but they're just as big a problem at Matarangi, and we've got waste problems around the district.
Yep. Yep, so through the chair, I understand what you're saying.
And I just say, doing something piecemeal, I know it solves that problem, and I totally agree with what Murray says. We need to start changing people's behaviour now, well in advance of when we finally fall on a final position. But I'm starting to think you can make your life more difficult as more people come in and contest that before you've actually provided the overall or the holistic solution. And so I agree that to get our thing here, which is long overdue, we need, in this community, there's certainty around it. But I see it as part of a bigger issue facing us, and I'm not necessarily happy with where I landed the other day at our council meeting.
So I hear what you're saying, and it's always better to have a full, complete view of anything before you even step off go, and know exactly where you're going with it. What I would say to that, the counter to that is that it's very hard to make any progress if you wait over everything, and there's often things where that we need to do this bigger review, but there might be an immediate issue that we're going to deal with, that we know that if we do the bigger review, we're not going to land on where we are currently at the moment anyway. So you know what I mean? I think there's ways you can do. You can't stop everything. It's a bit like the shoreline management plans. That's right. You can't stop everything. There's things that you've got to do, and then there's things that you might throw into the larger, longer term strategy. So that would be my answer to that.
Bruce, as an adjunct to that, I believe that we could have, and I believe we should have by now, a complete comm strategy. And I go on radio sometimes, and it's a pretty ad hoc, this is the subject of the week. So we suck that lollipop this week and we suck another lollipop next week. Sure. And I have been banging on for 6 months or 8 months now that we need to start a strategy on rubbish to get through for the next 2 years. Because, and I really believe that. And I think it's something you could bring up and I'm not telling you how to suck eggs, and I don't want to tell you how to suck eggs. But I just think we're disjointed in our approach to this, and I believe, and I'm in Tony's camp, I believe if we get a real good comms team, I was talking to John Wright just 2 nights ago, we can start with the kids, we can bring it through. When we get in a year's time, 2 years' time, when your contract comes up, I think we can save you guys a hell of a lot of pressure by getting the work done now.
Yeah, no,
and I really get despaired on that.
Yeah, no, through the chair, I don't disagree. We can't wait, and then something that we're doing the contract, and now we're rushing around like mad things trying to do those things. Yeah. These things, any educational stuff, and you guys know all this as well, it takes a long time. We've got to be into it a long time earlier than when we actually want it to start actually working for us. So
I believe we're at 5 to 12 now.
Yeah, so I don't disagree with anything to say.
In the absence of gullinators, is there an option being considered? Because I'm tired of picking up everyone's rubbish around our place.
So through the chair, the option is to, come back to Murray's point, is education of people who wash and clean and not just put food scraps straight in the bag that then attracts all the seagulls. So that's, I know that sounds a little bit harsh, but that, and it's a pain in the cheeks to do it. We all know that. You've got to get the rubbish out quickly and you've got to get to work.
Uses a lot of water.
No, not a lot of water, not a lot of water. No, you can be pretty careful with the way you do it. So I think that's probably the easiest solution to implement. I know it's not the easiest because people have to then do it themselves at home, but again, it comes back a little bit to that trying to get a bit more personal responsibility in how people are managing their waste and how they're dealing with it. You know, the other thing I see quite a lot is people putting bags out the night before. You know, and the bags should not go out the night before. They should go out on the morning of the collection. I know that again squeezes people because you've got to get it out before 7:30 because you don't know when the truck's coming. But all of those things help mitigate it, and they don't resolve it all because if the bag doesn't get collected till 4 in the afternoon, then obviously it doesn't matter whether it goes out at 7:30. But yeah, again, when it does come back to what Murray's saying. None of these things are easy, and they're multifaceted. And if they were really easy, we would have solved them all by now. But we haven't, so we've just got to keep trying and keep trying to work on it. Yeah. Wheelie bins, I think, would be one way where the bags were an issue. We obviously touched on that in the LTP and signalled that we think that's where it's going for the next contract to wheelie bins. So yeah, it does make sense, I think. So we need to go through all that process leading up to the contract and work through the options around that.
And was it Sandra that shared something on food waste collection and a trial that had been done somewhere? So there's a few
There are
that would reduce the.
There are about 3 of them being done. There's the one
We'll canvas the other day.
Yeah. Oh, Hal McCabe and her team.
Yes, one was over.
And I think getting back to a consistent level of standard or service of delivery across the district. You know,
that's the comms message
I think
that
is really
is that we are in the game of a consistent level of service.
Yeah.
Whether it be one collection a week, one a month, one a day, I don't care what it is.
Yeah.
But we should be starting that process now.
Yes.
So people understand that that's where we're heading. And anything over and above that is the opportunity for a private contractor or someone else, but not us.
Yep.
Because that will be the sort of stuff we're going to have to get into. When the note goes out, that if that's what happens in the long-term plan, that those 2 monarchs come out, you better believe me that this room here will be bloody full of people complaining, who will then turn up in Thames and complain, but we haven't actually sown a seed. We need everyone to understand that we are fair to everyone. 1 collection a week, if that's what the deal is, on whatever day it is. And after that, you have to look after yourself.
Yeah.
Because I understand the dynamic in Pedo Bay. There are only 10 people that live there. The rest will come down for weekends and extended periods of time.
Yeah.
And the rest are all booker batches. And when booker batch people go out, they're in some bloody rubbish. They're interested in getting their car and getting home.
But this is where this overarching strategy sort of fits in. I mean, what works for these isolated little village communities versus what works in town?
So what I do know, like if those things come out tomorrow, the phone won't stop ringing and someone will be driving over that bloody hill to pick the bags up to get rid of the rubbish.
Yeah.
So somehow to me, we've got to get more on the front foot than make a decision without a plan. And so I need to talk to Murray because I was in the same camp as him and say, yeah, I didn't start there, I ended up there. But I think I need to get away from that because we didn't think about what the end effect was.
We've had QC sitting around this table.
Plenty of them.
On rubbish on.
I know, we have. And the challenge is that the council, we actually kind of do this to ourselves often, so when we look back at when the Molochs were put in years ago, it was around council staff trying to be accommodating and trying to meet a need.
Correct.
And trying to do the right thing by putting these things in as like a trial, and now we're left with them, the people don't want them to come out, We've gone too bespoke, which just adds costs, when we go to this kind of model. So I think there's a lot we can do around winding this back, but you're right, we are going to have this room full of people and the room in Thames full of people. Even if we do all the comms, we're still going to have those people in the room, is what I believe, because...
No, you will. But we may change our thinking on
those. If we go to one standard, then it's very hard for them to argue one level of service across the district. They'll still argue it.
They will, yeah. And I guess we get into this, and I'm not getting off topic here, but do we want greater consistency or do we want different solutions for different areas? So
And that might be.
This is where,
Agreed.
yeah.
that's where the bigger strategy comes in. That's what we're going to be working on. We've got to get that sorted as we head forwards.
But in 2013, when we did that waste mineralisation, and Tony were on that, we talked about a PDA that we talked about, if they want an additional collection, they have a target grade.
Yep.
Never did that. And if we'd stung them a bit, they might have made some of them think.
Yeah.
Because if they want additional collection, running a truck up from Thames to do a special collection for them, it's going to be expensive.
Yeah, it is, and it's tricky because the way the contractors have to price everything, it's often hard to ring fence all those costs.
I agree.
100%. So even though we can apportion a lot of costs to those, that bespoke kind of service, we still end up with more costs and complexity coming into the rest of the business. So, so it does bring costs up. So, but anyway, we've got to go through that process.
I don't know who we should talk to, because on the 1st of next month, we have a meeting to sign that LTP off. Well, no, sorry, do the deliberations.
Deliberations on the 1st and 2nd, and then.
And out of those deliberations, if we take what we had on Monday, when it was, those monarchs are coming out.
Well, I think.
But we haven't had the discussion about how we're going to.
First thing I'd say is that decision hasn't been made yet. So
no, it hasn't been.
I don't want to preempt any decisions that are going to get made on the 1st and 2nd, and then get adopted at the end of June. So.
So the third position from us was out around that table in advance. So when we get it back, it'll be no different than how we went out. We put 1, 2 and 3 options, 1 being our preferred option and 3 or 5, what it was, being the least preferred.
Yeah.
So we're going to go through that process, but
yeah,
it's just that I'm going to probably have talked to some more people about it, but I'm probably going to have a change of mind on Monday from where I sat in the workshop the other day, because we haven't actually talked about how we're going to manage the comms to tell people where we're going, and how we're going to actually manage it ourselves if we go there and it turns to custard, because it will, I will put my life on it. It is going to turn to custard.
But that's an operational issue that I'm sure Bruce and his team will be well aware and thinking about how do we manage this, whatever the outcome may be from those deliberations.
Both an operation and a political issue.
It is, but what I would say to that is that if I present, like a comms plan to you today, it's still going to blow up when we make that change.
We know.
So it's not like if I give you a really good comms plan, when you guys are deliberating on the 1st and 2nd, you'll say yes or you'll say no. I think it's, you know what I mean? It's bigger than that. It's not just about that. It's the decision needs to be made, and then we have to do the comms no matter what.
And that's exactly reinforcing 2 years lead time for a contract.
Yeah.
Certainly reinforcing that.
Yeah. So I think, we've signalled our preferred option in the consultation document. We've had the hearings. We can have the deliberations on the 1st and 2nd. The document will get adopted, the LTP, at the end of June. So that we're working on a process. So but I've taken us off topic quite widely. So if there's any more questions.
No,
work program. Jeremy, any questions on the work program? You're trying to what?
I'm trying to unmute it. I didn't want to get into the argument of waste.
All right. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Okay. So, all those in favour for the work program?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Okay. Thank you, Bruce. The next is our action schedule report. Thank you, Murray. Seconded by Delly. Any discussion? No.
Discussion.
No. Oh, yes, maybe.
Because you asked to have a put in there.
No. Okay, all those in favour?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. All right, that takes us to our members' reports. Jeremy, would you like to go first?
Please.
Okay, then you can go to bed.
Thank you. I don't really have a lot. 2 things. One, attended the Anzac Parade in Whitianga, which was fantastic. Also wanted to note the tragic passing of Shane Harnett, which was the Hahei owner.
When did that happen?
A couple of weeks ago.
3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Yes. which is, and he was obviously part of the Hahe Fire Brigade, so he's left a big hole
Yeah.
in the community, but he got a great send-off, so yeah, that's all I have.
All right, thanks, Jeremy. Bill?
No, Jeremy.
Good night.
Yeah, right.
Good morning.
Only thing that I've had one or two people concerned about the undercutting of the shoreline by the boat ramp at Robinson Road, and you're now saying that it's a work in progress, but I was expecting some information that hasn't turned up yet. The rest of the time I've been concentrating on other things which are not necessarily community board related.
All right, okay, thank you. Tony?
No, just the normal things. People know I met with Colin Hassel for half an hour, half a day rather, on a number of issues over there, and
that's short.
And pretty valuable, interesting. Talking even to what's his name? Our coastal scientist this morning. Jamie, rather. Yeah.
Yes.
There's they're in dialogue, and a lot of what they're talking about, those have been given consideration. But the one thing about him, he might have some issues, but he always offers up a solution of some kind, and he'd like to work with us as opposed to, and help us as opposed to anything else. And then I'm away tomorrow for an integrated catchment meeting in Hamilton, and I'll be back there on the 25th for a transport meeting, and Wellington on the 4th for a regional transport meeting down there as well. So that's me.
Okay,
oh, sorry, one thing I should say, I did attend the Ratepayers Association meeting.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yes, and Heather was there too as well, and I was a little bit cross with the speakers at the end were given or nominated what they were speaking about, and one person in particular spoke about 5 other things at great length before he spoke about what he was supposed to be there for. And I've forgotten his name, but he's involved with Waikato Regional Council, and poor old Emerson and I, we didn't quite agree. It just went on and on and on, and was nothing whatsoever to do with ratepayers.
I dialed into that because I wasn't here.
Yeah.
I've got to say, I didn't listen to the after meeting. I've got to say, I thought Lindstoff actually did a pretty good job running that meeting, and I thought the meeting was actually run very, very well for the meeting. I wasn't there for the discussions at the end of it, so I don't know how that went, but I thought the meeting was quite well constructed and well managed myself.
Good. Good to hear.
No, not much report. Like Bill, I attended the Anzac Parade. Very good numbers turned out. But with number of meetings and hearings and goodness knows what, we've sort of been tied up with that. So I've got nothing else to report.
I attended the Matarangi Anzac Parade for the first time, and I was incredibly impressed. It was a huge turnout and a great little march, and really well celebrated or commemorated by is it Marie, who's a celebrant from
Marie Taylor.
Yeah, and my job, as most of you know, there's been some sad news with my brother. He's had a terminal cancer diagnosis, so we've kind of been a bit tied up with that in family. But my job between now and the waste workshop, which is now a multifaceted workshop, is to talk to a few people at different organisations that have got sort of like comms and education and community program stuff already in place, and collect some of that to bring to the meeting, because if it's out there, we don't want to reinvent it.
Absolutely.
Agreed.
So I promise I'll get stuck into that next week. That's me.
I really don't know where the last 6 weeks have gone, but thank you all for your wonderful support when my dad passed away, and the flowers and cards and things, and stepping up and attending different things. So thank you for that. But yeah, I don't really have anything to add for my members' report. So can I just have a mover and a seconder for the members' reports, please?
I'll move.
Thank you. Seconded by, thanks, Jeremy.
Good man.
All those in favour?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. All right, fantastic. That takes us to the
Excluded.
public excluded. So Jeremy, you've got a conflict of this, so you might want to log off.
I'll sign off there. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Good luck tomorrow.
No fundraising tomorrow.
Yes, good luck.
All right, can I have a thanks from me by a mover and a seconder to take us into public exclude, please?
I'm going to do it now. Okay.
Let's do it.
Yeah, because I've got to go in about 10 minutes anyway, so that would be
Okay.
good.
Moved by Delly, seconded by Bill, thank you. That takes us to item 6.2. Or do we have minutes?
6.1, please.
6.1.
Are we still recording?
All right, sorry.
You've got to be off. Yeah.
Sorry.
Everything's